Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Really pleased to have you here today. We've got some really great content to take you through. Today, we're going to be looking at game design for sustainable Web3 economies. It's an incredibly complex subject, so hopefully we're going to give you all something you can go away and action immediately after today's session. So we're going to be looking at how machinations can be used to simulate play-to-earn economies, what are the potential issues with play-to-earn game economies, and how machinations can then be used to test different mitigation strategies. So my name's Matthew, I'm the evangelist for Machinations, still horribly addicted to Factorio, and alongside me as always is Cesar, our diagram craftsman, who's been building us some incredible models for us to look at today. Firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is such an important subject and what it is we're actually going to be going into today. So I'm going to seamlessly transition over to this, move my windows around. So let's talk about game economies and why it's so hard and what the real challenges that we're facing when we're looking to understand what's going on in all sorts of different crypto games, NFT games, or anything else where we're kind of leveraging blockchain technology. People that have been on one of our sessions before will be quite familiar with this, a super simplified core game loop of almost every game. You boil it right the way down to its very essence. What's going on here? The player's going to play the game, they're going to earn some form of rewards, then that'll enable them to level up or reinvest those rewards to either accomplish something more challenging, or maybe it makes the overall progression get a bit faster. So it's a nice simple loop of a source, a pool. They're reinvesting their rewards. They're getting some increase in their level, which is increasing their rewards. Now, the first thing we're doing with crypto games is we're adding this extra loop in. So now, rather than the player just having the one option of taking those rewards and reinvesting them to increase their progression, they now have the option to actually sell these items across different types of marketplaces and accelerate their progression. Actually get some real world money and actually make some cash from the game potentially. Now, where this starts to get complex is rather than just kind of one progression loop and every player operating in isolation. So if we do a good job, hopefully we've got lots of these loops going on simultaneously, or in fact, if we do a really good job, we'll have a huge number of these individual loops going on all the time. Now, where this starts to become very complex is in a traditional game design or free-to-play game, these would all be isolated game loops going on, but now we're linking these together through different types of marketplaces. So this could be NFT marketplaces, or it could be some form of automated market maker where players can exchange their tokens for different types of cryptocurrencies, or even into real hard cash. Well as selling their items, players that might want to accelerate their progression or buy into the tokens, hoping for some other form of rewards. And as well as purchasing items, they could then be purchasing tokens. Now, at this point, there have been games in the market that have attempted this before, where this increases in complexity is all of these items are now linked into the blockchain. So any volatility or any changes to the blockchain that the tokens are linked to, that can have a knock-on impact to your gameplay or even your progression systems within your games. So our challenge now isn't just to look at one individual game loop. Our challenge now is to understand how all these individual game loops and these different progression systems are linked together and how they influence each other and what the impact of these changes are going to be on our marketplace. So if you're working with a game economy designer who's facing this challenge, give them a big high five and a hug because they've got a big challenge ahead of them. Now that we've kind of established why it's so important, I'm going to talk about how we can start to face these challenges. And the first step when we're looking at these models is to really start to think about, okay, well, let's understand what type of players we're going to have inside our game economies. And in order to do that, we're going to look at a few different personas. Now, with free-to-play games, the kind of personas and the language of our personas have been well developed over many years. So we've got our whale players; those are the ones we really want to attract into our game. They're going to be the ones that spend a lot of money and play our experience a lot. We've got dolphins and minnows who will come in, they'll play the game often, maybe not spend the amount the whales will, but will still be spending within our environment. Non-spending offer takers, passive players. We've got those players who are at risk of churn that we want to make sure we can draw them back in. And we want to make sure we've got a nice gradual onboarding experience for new players, with an average kind of time of 16 days for somebody to make their first purchase in a free-to-play game. We want to give them a nice experience where they can understand the game and have that experience before we start bombarding them with offers. Now, I don't know about you, there are amazing games out there in the world, and I'm not sure why anyone would ever play anything other than Factorio, and why you'd be drawn into playing Axie Infinities or any of these new crypto games, when for the low price of about $20 you could play Factorio instead. But that's kind of the point, which is these new types of games are attracting new types of players, which have got different expectations and requirements around their play experience. Navic did a fantastic post. I'll be sure to post a link to this article that they did a little while ago, looking at how they've defined the new personas that are being developed and kind of being thought about in the crypto space. So going from the left, we have our investors, we've got our crypto whales, those are probably the ones we want to attract the most into our economies, all the way through to fun-seeking players who are looking for a fun game to play, probably don't care too much about the economy, but they want to have a fun game to play, and the economy mechanics are just an added bonus into that experience. So I'm going to talk to you about our super awesome concept of a brand new game, which is called Machicats. Didn't really have to go far to look for inspiration for this amazing game concept. My cat loves watching Machinations, the little dots moving around. He just enjoys it all day long. So we've just come up with this idea. We're going to talk about our Machicats game economy and how we've designed this inside Machinations and how we've thought about this with our game personas. So Machicats kind of turning into a bit of a trendy type of crypto game. It's a robotic cats. Machicats fight in the arena for PvP rewards. There's a PvE element where they fight random beasts out in the environment. And there's two types of tokens that they can receive as rewards. Players can then use those tokens to combine our robotic Magicats into whole new NFT Magicats. Players can sell the tokens, they can buy and sell the Magicats. They can also buy skins as cosmetic items for their magic packs, so they can really customize their Magicats to how they want them. And it's a fun concept. There's no pretty artwork for you today. So we're going to have a think about the first step in understanding our economy, which is think about the player personas of Magicats and what sort of criteria they're going to have inside our experience. So we're going to kick off with Madalena, the gambler. It's a player persona. I'm not going to read through all of this, but one of the core things that we do with Machinations is, rather than just thinking about the terminology and the description of them, really want to start getting to the point where we can think about some real numbers that we're going to apply to this persona. So one of the key ones here is activity. So this persona don't log in every day. They log in when they have the opportunity. When they log in, it tends to be they'll play a full session. So we've got a mechanic inside Magicats where we're limiting the amount of gameplay that they can do each day based on an amount of energy that the cats have, because obviously cats sleep at least 70% of the time. So there's a 50% chance of them logging in and a 90% chance that once they've logged in, they'll play 90% of the session. Their buying habits, they're looking for that big win. Chances are this persona isn't going to buy or sell, isn't going to sell any tokens. They're probably going to have a higher chance of selling Magicats once they've done some combining and they've bred some amazing Magicat that's worth a lot in the NFT space. Now, one of the key things when you're going through building out these personas isn't just to think about this in terms of what their activity habits would be. You really want to put a bit of thought into how would you actually track these, and how would you identify this type of player once your game's live. So it's no good having a persona going, this is Brenda, this is our type of player persona we're looking for, if you can't understand how you can actually identify them inside your analytics. So the key areas that we're going to use to track Madalena persona is that they'll won't log in every day. They'll only sell higher value items. So by looking at those sorts of criteria inside our analytics, we should be able to identify which persona this player is when they're inside our game. Our next persona is Radu. He's a worker persona. So this is probably well documented at the moment. So these generally stem from the lower income nations, where they're time rich versus cash rich. So think about the scholars in Axie Infinity. This persona could be, looking to make an addition to their finances, or maybe they're relying on this to achieve what they want and pay some bills. So they're going to log in every day and they're going to max out their playtime whenever they can. Unlikely to buy whole magic hats if we get our economy right and our magic hats are valuable in the NFT space. But will normally sell their tokens quite often through the AMMs, either to receive some coins or some cash back for them. And we're going to be able to identify these by them logging in every day and being able to being able to look at which of our players are selling their tokens quite often. And the third one I'm going to go through is Mihai, our crypto whale. It's actually our photo of our CEO. So with this type of persona, someone who's probably going to get involved in the project quite early, going to be buying in their investing potentially large sums into the economy, and probably ideally going to be holding on to those assets for quite a long period of time. We could be contributing into scholarship programs so that they can get some form of passive income from the game. So our data points that we're going to look for are early adopters who are holding our assets and using workers for passive income. Just to give you the heads up, today's session in terms of Machination Skills, we're not going to be going through too many of the basics. We are going to be kind of talking about the workflows in here and going through these models. In fact, Cesar, shall I hand over to you to kind of run through this model?
So this the model that we're seeing here is supposed to be one player's journey through our Mackie Cats game. Now players have a bunch of different options. The first and probably most important one is the option to log in or not. So every day you can log in or not. Some players will do that more often, especially people that are trying to earn money from the game are going to do that more often. Some people will do that less. Once you do log in, there are people who are going to play as much as they can, consume all of their stamina. There are people that will only play 1 or 2 games and then log off, so they won't stress too much about the game. They can choose to perform different activities in the game. Those activities will generally return tokens. In our game, we have 2 types of tokens. We weren't so creative as to give them names, so we only have token 1 and token 2. Token 1 is the cheaper one and the easier obtainable one. Token 2 is the more expensive one, but both of them are needed. So players can generate these tokens, and this is another point where choice comes into play, because they can choose to sell these tokens and the price of a token varies over time, or they can choose to breed their cats by using both tokens. Obviously the cheaper one is more of it is required, the more expensive one is less required. So they can breed and obtain more cats, and the more cats you have, obviously the more you can play. The more you can play, the more tokens you can earn, and it's kind of this snowball effect. The more you can earn, and so on. some players do not complicate with this at all. They just log in, do whatever they can in a day, get their tokens and sell those tokens for as much as they can, and then they are done for the day. So player profiles do come into play here. Aside from aside from selling tokens and selling cats, they can also purchase tokens or purchase cats, because it's not only through breeding that you can gain new cats. There is a marketplace for those cats, and in there you can buy them, and it's much less time consuming than breeding them, but obviously it comes for a price. And for those that want to have an early start and be ahead of their competitors, they will probably purchase as many cats as they can to try and have a big impact on the marketplace. Is there anything? Oh yeah, you can also purchase cosmetics. We've added cosmetics to this model. They don't really do anything, as in they don't help with gameplay. They do give you fancy costume or customize your cat. There are players of certain profiles that are less profit oriented and more gameplay oriented. They like to own unique stuff. They like to own fancy things. They don't really care that much about earning a lot of money. So we are covering this type of player persona as well in here. That's why we have cosmetics. They do not bring anything to the gameplay.
And so one of the key things that we've done here, and one of the core uses of this model, is for us to be able to then understand what's going on with our player personas. So those 9 personas that we were talking about a moment ago, from Navic, ranging from crypto whales, we've got as number 1, all the way down to fun seekers as number 9. We've actually then, we're using a pool here. So when we put a number into this pool, so if I pick number 3, that's going to give me persona number 3. What we've then done is we've gone through and we've made some wild ass assumptions around what their play style are going to be. And we've kind of built up a profile of how often these players would log in, what sort of activity there would be, what we think their chances of making a purchase in either buying or selling items or tokens. And we then use this to then create different types of simulations using machinations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick persona number 3. I'm going to hit batch play once I've cleared up this model, and we're then going to start to build up data. So when I hit batch play, it's sending our model up to AWS Lambda, it's parallelizing the simulations, and it's starting to bring me back data on how quickly these, or how often these players are going to progress, how many tokens they're generating, and all sorts of useful data about how this exact persona is going to interact with our experience. So within a couple of seconds, I can start to generate this data. Then I can adjust this, make this number 6 a worker style persona, and I can then hit batch play again and look at how these different personas are then experiencing our environment and what impact this is having on our progression systems. So let me clear this up because we've got a bit too much data here for the moment. I'm going to pick one from each of these runs just to compare how this looks. There it is. So here I can see now my different numbers of tokens that they're generating throughout this experience. That's ranging from 11,000 tokens all the way down to kind of 9,300 tokens. And I can start to use this information, and certainly their propensity to spend, to look at building out average statistics for each of our personas. And this really starts to help us start to build up an understanding of our overall game economy. Because from here, we're going to switch into our overall economy model that we've created for this project. So here, we're then taking that data that we've generated from our persona models. We've run hundreds of simulations against each of those personas, and we've then created summary data that we've entered into this model in the form of arrays. So here, as the player progresses, let's pick our token supplies. We've then started to build up data on what's the average number of tokens that these players are buying and selling as they progress through the first 6 months and they've kind of ramped up into the game. And what's this going to start to do to our economy? This way we can actually then start to look at, well, what's the different motivators and what's the different driving forces behind each of these personas that we've created, and how well will we be able to then satisfy the needs of those particular players. Now, if we built an incredibly rich game that's going to compete with Fortnite and Call of Duty and God of War, we might decide we're going to have more of that player style persona. If we can build a game economy that rewards whale investors and it's going to give them a long-term return, we're going to attract more of those players. So using Machinations, we can then go through and build out our economic models, looking at what type of players are we going to start to attract within our ecosystem. Now I'm going to switch over to a slightly more simplified model. Here we go. So this model doing the same sort of thing, but rather than all of that complexity, I've kind of simplified this slightly, and we're looking at how what the sort of impact of a couple of different personas are. The key thing with this is we're going to look at how many tokens can we then generate per day for the average player. And using our initial simulations, we've been able to assess we can actually generate about 550 tokens per day on average as people go through and play the game. As well as our game economy, one of the kind of core challenges that I kind of started off today's presentation with is that actually all of our game economy is now linked through an AMM. So our tokens that are traded on an AMM are linked to our cryptocurrency prices. So any volatility in that side could actually then impact our gameplay as well. So as well as our gameplay, we also have a AMM simulation that's just going to help us understand what the impact of changes to our game economy are across the entire ecosystem. I'm going to hit batch play. Let me drop this down a little bit. Rerun our simulation so that we can then have a look to see what impact this is having. Someone just asked if the chat will be saved. Yes, we do save the chat. We don't normally post it anywhere, but I'm sure we could. So within a couple of seconds, we can start to get back data. And the purple line here is tracking the Ethereum blockchain price. The black line is actually looking at that play to earn style worker persona and looking at how much money they could be generating on a daily basis. Well, immediately we can start to see the type of issues that we could have inside one of these economies. Starts off super healthy. We're generating over $4 a day. In fact, as the Ethereum blockchain prices increases, we're spiking to over $15 a day, $16 a day potentially. But because we're then flooding the marketplace with too many of these tokens, we've started to cause inflation, and actually the daily earnings drop right down, and actually we're down into the kind of 30 odd cents, 22 cents potentially. Because Machinations using Monte Carlo, it's randomizing the play so that each simulation is going to have slight differences to it. Now, when we then, the beauty of Machinations is that we can then look at, well, how could we adjust or make changes to our economy in order to give ourselves a more sustainable game economy. So I'm now going to change that to 150 tokens and rerun our simulation to see how this has changed and what impact this is then having on our game economy. So within a few seconds, this will go up to the cloud, we'll process, and we'll start to get back data. You keep a good eye on the chat. I don't know if there's any questions. There's lots of chat going on in there, Chesa. Perfect.
The chat is going really fast.
Okay. I can't keep up with it. I'll let you and Horia.
Yeah. We have people on it.
Perfect. So what this is now showing us is that within a couple of seconds, we can get back the data. Because we're starting with a smaller number of tokens that the player can receive each day, the earnings are a bit lower. But as we progress, because we've added that additional constraint into our economy, we've been able to create a much more sustainable game economy. Now, this is one of the really big challenges that we all face. And kind of once we've been through this process of designing and keeping up with what's going on with our design before we've launched, this is really where the hard work and the fun really begins. Because now, as well as having our prediction data, and we've created all of our beautiful personas, we've obviously done that with a huge amount of assumptions, and we've used our best judgment, we've used market data, we've looked at all of these different trends to create our predictions. But it's really important to remember that we're basing this on some assumptions. So once the game actually goes live, we can actually start generating real data. We can use our data points when we first kicked off our project to understand what sort of personas we think we're going to attract. We can then go through our analytics data and start to evaluate how close were we with our assumptions. No one's got a perfect crystal ball. No one's going to get it perfectly right. It's about being prepared and being ready to understand what your real world data analytics are then starting to give you, so that you can use that data to put that back into the Machinations model and then rerun your simulations. So if we went through and we made some assumptions, really important to call out what your assumptions are, what they were based on, and then use your real world analytics back into the Machinations model to validate, to see, okay, now we've got our persona number 6, which was our worker persona. How are they actually interacting with our environment? What's their progression like? What are the trends that they're doing? We made an assumption that they would log in all the time. We made some assumptions that they would be selling their tokens. How often are they selling their tokens? Is there a pattern to the way they're selling their tokens? If we then looked at one of our other personas, so maybe our player personas, maybe that our gameplay's really been a hit and we're getting in more people that just want to play the game into our environment, we can then look at how they're interacting, what sort of trades they're doing, what sort of propensity they have to purchase our cosmetic items. We can then rerun our simulations and update our economy models with that, and then look again into how often or what's going on with our economy in the future based on our clarified data. So we can then start to remove assumptions. Every time we're going to be looking forward, there's always going to be issues where we're going to have to still have some assumptions. We're going to have an assumption that those players' behavior that we've seen in our analytics is going to continue. The next step is, now that we've got a visibility and we've got an understanding and a mechanic so that we can check our economy and see what the trends, see if there's any issues well before they actually start to become big issues. The idea is, how do we then look at, if we do have an issue with our mechanics, how can we rectify this and how can we course correct these back into our game mechanics to do a course correction. Now, the idea of this type of workflow is that this enables you to be able to spot those issues much, much earlier and be able to put a small course correction into your game economy rather than waiting for your economy to get into a horrible shape where your token values have dropped, or your NFT items are being sold in bulk and dropping the value of them because you've let the economy go too far. So the whole idea of Machinations is to use that ability to identify that and resolve those issues as early as possible, so that you can actually put a very small correction in without having to make big changes and shocking your players.
I have a question.
Perfect.
I mean, chat has a question. Could you help a player by giving them hints on how to optimize their play according to your model? How is that different than reacting to players versus shaping their play?
Absolutely. So one of the kind of the key steps in this process is, once you've created that understanding of what your personas are, how they're playing, you can look at tailoring not only your education, or it could be putting out some videos on how to make the most of their gameplay. It could be putting out hints and tips, putting those directly into the UI, so that making sure that players understand all the features that are available in your game if they're not engaging with certain elements. But also it could involve marketing activities. So if you're attracting a huge number of one type of persona, that could start pulling your economy in one direction. It might just be an approach of what can you do in your marketing activities to find more of different types of personas that would help balance and align your game economy.
There's another question that I'll handle. How do you make a model that deals with multiple generation probabilities? For example, in our game, we have a resource that once mined rolls one of 8 multipliers to give you your resource generation. So when I hear rolling and random and words like that, Machinations is actually perfect for that.
Well, I think there's kind of 2 steps to that. But before we go into the answer, which is you're absolutely right, Machinations can do that. You'll notice in our model here, when we're looking at our personas, Magic Cats with a Z is an incredibly complex, engaging play with huge amount of strategic choices that you have to make. And we've boiled all of that down into one gate with a 50-50 chance of the player either winning or losing. And there's often a step that you want to go to and understand what level of abstraction you need at different levels. So typically, whenever we're approaching a project, we look at between 2 to 3 models. The first model is this single player experience to look at how they progress overall in their economy. The second one is that master economy model, so we can understand different personas, how different personas coming into our experience could impact our overall economy. The third model, which is then the actual gameplay model itself. So when we're looking at mechanics like that, we obviously Machinations can simulate all of that. I know Cesar's going to expand on it in a moment. But that's where kind of a third model, and this one gate, which is in our progression system, we're just looking at a win-lose. This could be a 500-600 node object.
Yes, so abstraction is definitely important when you're building a model. You'll see that there are a lot of aspects here that we've made more abstract, like the example that we're seeing right now, the game. Instead of focusing on what the gameplay is, we just have 50-50 chance because you're going to have sort of an MMR anyway, and the MMR is going to take care that the player stays around the 50% win rate most of the time. There's other aspects to this that can be, so it's totally up to you what you choose to implement fully and what you choose to make a bit more abstract. For the breeding one, so basically random gates that you see right here with 50-50, having 8 possible multipliers, having them as dices, because you said that you are rolling them. So I imagine that you have attributes and they can have varying numbers in those attributes. So whenever one is, let's say, created, you can have a source that pushes 8 attributes forward, and it can generate between 1 and, let's say, 10 or whatever the maximum value is for each attribute. And as simple as that, it's basically just a source and some pools. And having that randomness in there in the dice ensures that you're going to have, you can even make it smarter if you want, because maybe some games have, like, if your parents have certain traits, the child is also going to have like an average of those traits or something close to that. So you can make it formula based, you can make it completely random, it's up to you, but it can be done easily using dice on labels, which is something that we support.
Thanks, Cesar. There's a great question here, which is there an optimal ideal ratio for the personas within the game ecosystem? For example, would having 10% whale to all persona ratios be better than 8% whale? Same question for different types of personas. So this is where there isn't a one size fits all answer for that. Certainly crypto whales are going to make large investments and then hold onto those investments in your tokenomics and NFTs potentially. They're great. They're obviously going to push the value of your tokens up and increase your game economy. If you had 100% whales, that might be amazing. You would go to the moon probably. However, what's more important is actually being able to simulate and test to see what impact different types of ratios and different users coming into the environment could have. So using Machinations, once you've built out these models and you've understood what the progression or what the economy impact of each of those users are, running simulations to look at, well, if you did receive 8% of your players were whales versus 10%, what impact is that going to have on your game economy? So that's a great kind of use case that you could do inside Machinations. I think I had a couple of other questions. Is the recording going to be shared? Yes, we'll have this up on YouTube next week some point. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Can I know what platform he's creating the gaming model on? I'm not quite sure what that question means. This is the Machinations platform, I guess. Can you help a player by giving them hints on how to optimize? I think I answered that one. So this is for on-chain game correct. How is this for cross-chain, say Polygon and Chainlink? So really the key to understanding this is understanding how those different markets interact with your game and building out the mechanics for those trading mechanics inside Machinations. I think that's the answer to that one. I think there's some more questions coming in. Do you offer a service where you look at models we make in Machinations and suggest efficiencies? I've built a number of large models, but I'm finding a lot of trouble connecting to them together. Yeah, that's a kind of a great question there from Sam of how can you if you've got lots of complex models, what's the kind of the best way of connecting them? Cesar, do you want to take that?
Well, one method is the one that we're actually going to be showing today, I think. So as we were talking earlier about abstraction, let's have the example where you create the gameplay of your game. So the player, what are they effectively going to do in the game? They're going to fight other cats. They're going to win or lose. Okay, that's a complex system. But at the end of the day, they're either going to win or lose, right? So you're going to have a model that's going to be focused on that gameplay, and you can almost hold it separately. And you can have some player personas there. You can have skilled players. You can have whale players. You can have players that don't care. You can have AFK players, whatever. And based on that, you can run the model and get your results. You're going to see that the whale player probably gets a higher win rate, let's say 60%, 65%, right? So what you do is you look at that model, you take the data from it, like the win rate, and you go back to your model, your larger one, which is probably going to look something like the one we have with just a random gate and a 50-50, and you input that data as 65-35. So you're using one model to create data that you're feeding into your second model, which basically encompasses your first model in only a couple of nodes, if that makes sense. So that's an easier way to do it. A harder way to do it would obviously be to create like a giant mass of nodes. I have had my fair share of models of 1,000 to 2,000 nodes. So it can get messy. I know it can. I also always advise people to use layers. Like layers are super useful, super important. You might have noticed them in the bottom right. They can hide stuff in your model. They can hide whole systems that still work in the background, so you don't get lost in what you've built. So yeah, those my two advices would be: one, organize your diagram in a very nice way. Use color, use layers, use groups, use text nodes to express what belongs where. And my second one would be use models to generate data that feed into a more abstract model. So you can have something that you build in 3,000 nodes, you can build it in 30 nodes. If you use different models to get that data and feed it into it.
I was just asking about the Ethereum blockchain prices that I had in the model.
Oh, I saw you going to the array.
Yeah, I was just going to show off my stupid array here that I have. So what we've done here is, here's a matrix array, and I meant to update that. It's 501 days of Ethereum blockchain prices are in this array. I change the font for size when I do this, because otherwise, if it's too big, it takes up half the screen just of the array data. But then I just use this to have a look up back into the looking at this array to look at what's the Ethereum blockchain price on that day. So I think let's do a kind of a slightly bigger reveal. So this is our Magic Cats model. What we've done here is we've got our different types of persona, where we've imported the data from our persona data back into this overall model. So here, if I zoom right the way in, you can see here I'm looking at what's the Magic Hat supply of this one type of persona. How often are they producing cats or selling these on the marketplace? Using this as an array. So we've generated our data from our persona models. We've done hundreds of simulations of these. We've then generated all the way down into the averages of the daily rates of these, each of the different personas. And we're then looking at how the personas are progressing as they go through their first 6 months. So we have a source here that's firing our new players based on the demand that we're seeing for this persona type into these delay nodes. These delay nodes, they spend 30 days. So as players come in, they spend 30 days in each of the delay nodes until they've got to a point where they're fully ramped up, and then they go into the end pool here. Hopefully we don't send too many into the drain and lose any players. But if our economy starts going wrong, we can simulate that inside Machinations to look at what point are they going to start draining and no longer kind of contributing to our economy. And we're then looking at the different types of tokens, whether or not they're going to be, how often these personas are buying and selling, how many they're buying and selling. And we roll this all up to our total influences here. So here we're looking at, out of all of the players we have inside our economy, how often are they purchasing our Magic Cats NFTs? How many of these Magic Cats are being bought by existing players to add to their collection so that they can have more energy or try out new skills of our amazing robotic cats? We're also looking at tokens. So how many tokens are being bought and sold each day, and what's the impact of this on our 2 token pools? Over here, we're then linking this into 2 simulated AMMs, which are both linked to the Ethereum blockchain. This could be any type of blockchain. It doesn't necessarily matter. Machinations, we just use that as for our example. So these 2 AMMs are then going to go through and constantly evaluating the value of our tokens to see what impact this is having.
There's a bunch of questions if you want.
There's a couple of questions for you coming up there, Jezo, I can tell.
Oh, it's for me. I was hoping it's for you, but okay. I can take them.
I think you should definitely take them. So this is kind of some of the areas that we then go through in Machinations to look at, not just kind of building up that persona data, but we can then use Machinations and start to think about what's the success or failure criteria for having and retaining that persona into our ecosystem. So to your point of, is it 8% or is it 10%? We can use Machinations rather than thinking about what would be a good result for us. Let's think about what would be a good result for that persona, and are we generating the type of economy that would satisfy that persona type? And if we're satisfying that persona type, which should mean that if we're doing a good job with our community, with our marketing, we're going to attract more of that player into our ecosystem. So I'm going to let you answer those questions, then I'll.
Yeah. Let me start with one from chat because I'm going to lose it if I don't read it now. So, couple of questions here. Can solid connecting lines, so resource connections, host complex formulas, or do you need to use registers? So, resource connections can host formulas, but not variables. So if you have a formula like, I don't know, random int 0 to 10, it's going to host it. But if you have random int 0 to 8, it's not. So the use of registers is specifically for variables. Whenever you want a variable, you're going to be using a register. There's no way around it. And is there a way to have a global variable? Now, we get this question a lot, and we're working on it. There are some global variables available on the right. You will notice them as die, skill, multiplayer, and strategy. If you type in any type of formula in there, or even a number, you can reference that variable by using, so what Matthew is showing is that you can have random int, but you cannot use a variable because the variable makes no sense for a connection. You can see on the right, as Matthew has the screen there, you can see the global variables. So for skill, for instance, if you were to type 5 plus 3 in the skill field and then use it as S, it will act as an 8. Not sure if it's supposed to be capital S, might need to be capital. And not sure if it works on research connections, but it does. So you can use that as a global variable. We currently only have the 4, but we are planning on adding them to be custom made. So yeah, that's, if you only need the one global variable, you can use the ones on the right. So you can use those. I see some questions in the Q&A. Broadly, how would you approach simulating drastic fluctuations in daily active users and its effect on the economy over time? Well, simulating drastic fluctuations in daily active users seems like something that does not occur naturally. So I'm guessing I would answer these questions by saying you can either manage your daily active users in a formulaic approach where you use data like, is it profitable to play the game? Is the game, I don't know, are people, you can even look at numbers in the past to try and predict the growing trend or the downwards trend. Is the price of Ethereum going up or down? So factors like this. And using this, you can kind of predict the daily active user, how the curve is going to look like. If you are going for big fluctuations, that sounds to me like you want to control the number directly. And if you want to do that, you can just dictate how many users you want coming or living in your game every step. And that should give you a large fluctuation. If you're planning to have 1,000 users come in day 1 and 5,000 living in day 2, that's obviously going to give you a large fluctuation. So because you have total control over that, you can have total control over that, then it's really up to how you build your model. That is probably the answer. For the second one, have you ever considered adding multi-agent paradigm to Machinations, particularly for such cases, multiple similar nodes, different personas? So I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sure how we would, like, I welcome you to try and give us an example of how you would see that. We are constantly trying to improve the language by making it easier to use. We notice that there are some type of constructions that require some workarounds in Machinations because the language sometimes can feel a bit basic. So we are trying to build additional even nodes, if possible, that help facilitate such cases. So if you have any idea on how to implement that, please give us a message anywhere, Intercom, Discord, wherever, so we can have a talk about it, because we are constantly trying to improve it, as I said. Can you provide a list of variables in your model which impact the game economies? Yes, like, can you, yeah, I mean, variables, the way we built the first model, the one that we showed with player personas, is basically the most simple way you can hook up a model to support variables. The way we have it is that we have player personas which are represented by numbers, right? 1 to 6. It can be 1 to 100 if you have different personas. The way we do it is that when changing a number, every operation in our model is looking at which number is that player persona. If it's 1, do this. If it's 5, do this, and so on. So because of that, by simply changing the value in a single pool, we change the entire behavior of the entire model. So it depends on how you build your model. So I always like to say this, that everything, like, if you can imagine it, Matthew also says this, you can probably build it in Machinations, and there's no one correct way to build something. Like, there's, for the same system, there's probably 10 different ways to do it. And it's not like one way is better than the other. As long as it works, it's correct. So no matter the solution you find, it's, as long as it's working, it's the correct one. It doesn't really matter.
Very true. Just think if there's any other questions, and I'll kind of try and bring us home. And
I have one. Multi-agent. Yeah, sorry from the multi-agent question. Multi-agent example: create an agent flow on a separate tab layer, then add a reference with a multiplier representing the number of such agents to the main model layer.
We're working on it.
We are.
Yeah.
I am trying to envision it because
we've got a number of improvements. I don't know how much I'll get in trouble for giving away early roadmap items, but one of the key things that we're working on at the moment is looking at how we can test our integrate and automate the ingestion of data back into Machinations, and that kind of goes between multiple models. So it's definitely something we've got coming up.
Have you guys thought about making a game to learn Machinations? That's not a question for me, and that's not a question for you. That is a question for our development team.
I don't think we're going to get into the game of into the world of actually making games. Like, Machinations is 100% dedicated to visualizing and helping developers understand their game economies. Like, I don't think we're suddenly going to try and compete with all of you brilliant creative people. You saw what happened. The best I could come up with was Mackie Cats with a Z. Like, I'm not a super creative. We just deal with game economies and logic, not the creative side of things.
I have one, but I think you're going to have to answer this one. What criteria we should consider choosing the blockchain when choosing the blockchain, Ethereum or others, for our game to create our tokens or NFTs?
That's such a good question. There's so many of them coming out there. There's lots of them which are coming up all the time. I think it really depends on what features and what services you need, and looking at their technology stack and whether or not that will support the type of game that you're creating. I don't think I would be able to go, this is the one that you should have. I think it's going to be it's a very fast moving space with lots of new players coming into it. I'm certain that gas fees, as somebody's already saying in chat, are an absolute killer. I went to do a trade a little while ago and it was $200 in gas fees. Nope, no, back out of that, cancel. Like, I'm not going to play. So it's be interesting to see which platform develops over the next few years. I think there'll be start to see some real winners in that space.
Do you have breakdowns of current play to earn economies as models such as X Infinity, etc.?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe is a good answer. Maybe is a good answer.
No comment. Well, look, let me do a quick sum up, and then actually we'll open up the floor to anybody who wants to come and chat to us and wants to ask us any questions. So before I go into that, let me share this. So all of our persona work, all of our modeling that we've done, and all of the data that we've kind of created inside this overall model to understand our economy, we can then start to run this model and start to understand what's going on with our economy at the moment. We were going to try and add in some interaction in today's session and look at what we could do to further balance this and get it more sustainable. Our blue token is doing very, very well. The originally named, because we're super creative, token number 2 is doing very well. Our token number 1 isn't doing quite so well, and we've got some deflation going on there, and it's dropping in value. So the beauty of Machinations is we could spend ages jiggling around with our models to make sure we've got a sustainable economy, and that we're going to attract the personas that we want to give us an amazing game. But hopefully today's session is giving you an understanding of the challenges that game designers and game economy designers are facing in this incredibly exciting space, and giving you some guidance on how you can use Machinations in these workflows to create them. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed by this and you're not quite sure how you could approach this or take on this monstrous challenge, we are working with a limited number of developers to actually kind of go through and help them build out these models and understand their economy flows. Maybe Hori will be kind enough to drop my meeting link into the chat. If you are building a crypto game and you want to learn more about Machinations, we'd love to have a chat with you. Where was I going to go to next? Oh, just to let you know, some really exciting stuff that we've got coming up for you very, very soon. Hori is going to drop the link into the chat to let you know about our next webinar. So we're going to keep on this subject of sustainable web economies. We had lots of fun this week. Mo and I joined the Mavia, Heroes of Mavia Discord channel, and we're actually building some Machinations models live with the team across their Discord channel, and kind of helping them understand how their game economies will work. They're actually going to come along to, now that we've been on their channel, they're going to come and join us in one of our webinars, where we're going to be kind of diving into their game economy and how they're developing their game using Machinations to make sure they've got a sustainable economy. So register for that one fast. It's going to be a great talk. It's a great team, and we're looking forward to getting involved with them. Excellent. Have I forgotten to say anything, Cesar?
The usual outro jingle, I don't know.
That was it. So I think thank you very much for everybody coming on. We're bang on time somehow today, but it doesn't mean we've got to jump off straight away. So if anybody has any comments, any thoughts, any questions that they'd like to share, and you want to, if you hit the raise your hand button down the bottom of the screen, we'll promote you to the panelists, and you can come and have a chat with us and tell us your thoughts if you have any.
And if we've missed any of your questions and you're feeling shy, you can also type them again in chat, and we'll read them and answer them. We aim to leave no question unanswered. So
I think what we'll do, I don't know, I'll probably have to ask Hori. I saw lots of people dropping their LinkedIn information into the chat, which is fantastic. We'd love to connect with you. I'm certainly going to go through it, and I'll say hi on there. Maybe there's something we could do, dropping some of that contact information via our Discord channel. I'm not sure how we can do that. Hori will probably say we can't do it. It's GDPR and things like that, to get people's permission to share it. But if we can, we will. If we can't, I'm sorry. But grab a copy and paste of the chat if you want to grab that information. There's a question here. Can you provide a list of variables in your model which impact the game economics? There's a lot. There's a huge number of variables that impact it. And actually, the variables that impact this game economy wouldn't necessarily apply to your game. Every game is unique, and there's lots of different impacts that could be completely unique for your game economy compared to anybody else's. So I'm not sure if there would be a kind of a one-size-fits-all answer to that. I saw someone raise their hand a moment ago, but it disappeared again.
Will you add option to easily change size of pools and add images, PNGs, and GIFs to the tool? You can already add images. You can do that in a text node. So if you drag a text node onto the canvas and click on it, you're going to see an option there to paste. You can paste an image, you can paste a link even. Now the trick with images is that they have to be URLs. So you're going to have to look for an image online. As for changing size of pools or nodes in general, that would actually be, I'm for it. So I see the use in that. I see that some pools are more important than others. Some registers, you want to highlight them. You can currently change the size of the text, so the size of the label, and you can currently change the color and the, what's it called? Like the edges. Matthew, I'm having a...
Oh, the border color.
The border, yeah. You can change the border width. That's the one. So you can currently change the border width. So you can make them more, you know, stand out a bit more. In the model shown today, how are you exporting data from model and importing into another? By hand. The answer is by hand. If you want to, so we could have done it differently. I'm thinking that it's not worth it because we only had like 6 different variables that we needed. So it's actually easier to do it by hand. Normally, you can export the results of your simulations. You can export them as a CSV. You can export even your models. You can export as Excel files. You can take that data and turn it into an array, copy paste it into another model. So that would be one way. I saw a lot of questions about exporting models. Now, exporting data and exporting models are 2 different things. Exporting data can be done by exporting the CSV files from your simulations. Exporting the model itself is also possible, and you can do that in Drive. You can export it as an Excel. It's going to show a bunch of nodes with a bunch of properties, and you can import it anywhere else. You can even change the Excel file, and it will change the Machinations model back when you import it. So a more generalized question, not sure it really pertains to design and maybe a topic for a different webinar, but has the environmental impact of blockchain been considered when designing for crypto-based games? I'm all for crypto, but some of the more established cryptos, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., I hear are pretty dirty. I am not going to answer that, Matthew. I'm looking at you. I don't know if you're going to answer that.
You read the question. I think, you know, I think when the amount of electricity that's required to do a single transaction is getting so ridiculously out of control, I know there's a lot of effort being put into it to hopefully reduce the environmental impact on it. And I don't think that can come soon enough. But we look at game mechanics, I'm afraid. Like, I'm not probably the expert to talk about that in any form of detail.
Are you going to be able to share the diagrams? We're going to share all of the diagrams today along with the recording. So
some of the diagrams today, not all of the diagrams.
Yeah,
today.
so yeah, true.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Yeah, exactly. Some of the diagrams. What's a good resource for player personas you mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, I've just dropped that link into the chat. Actually, I think there's some the one that I was talking about, and I kind of used as a bit of a guide, and this is where I got that image from. I think this was just an excellent way of kind of visualizing and breaking down those different types of personas.
Are there ways to create virtual links to pools so that things can be kept visually clean? Example, if there's 20 pools and each has 30 sources that increment those pools, maybe adding a global variable and the pool would read its value. I'm trying to envision this. So there's 20 pools and each of them has 30 sources that increment those pools. And you want that to be done without having 100,000 connections in there.
I think the key to this really is not necessarily to think about this as it's using some of these features that are already in here. So this kind of big reveal, gradual reveal that I did earlier using layers is a great way of keeping your model nice and clean. So you're only looking at the objects that you need to for the particular task. So when I was adding in my layer for purchasing tokens, I hid my purchasing items layer simply because they overlapped and it was a bit messy. So that way it enables me to keep them nice and tidy. And I can, control what I'm seeing on in the model at any one time. Quite often, and actually, if I jump over to another one of my models I did a little while ago, this model here, I've got a whole load of stuff going on in the background that makes it messy that I just didn't really want to see. So I just put that into a separate layer and then hid it so that I just can focus on the areas that I need.
Layers are awesome. Please use layers. Like really make a model clean.
There's a great question here. What criteria we should consider choosing the blockchain for our game to create our tokens or NFTs? I'm sure there's a number of people that are watching this right now who've got some big opinions on this. We'd love for you to come and help us answer that question. If anybody wants to raise their hand and come and share what they think about that, or imagine if you've got some thoughts on it, please do raise your hand and we can you can come and chat to us about it. I'm sure people have had enough of listening to me and Cesar by now.
Can you please explain a little bit more about array? We can, but what are you interested in? So array is basically, can you show an array, Matthew?
Yeah.
And not the Ethereum one, maybe.
Not a ridiculously massive one.
Yeah, no. Maybe a less intimidating. Yeah, so basically an array, you put numbers between square brackets and they act as an array. So Matthew is just going to input some random numbers in there. And after that, if you want to access a certain element in the array, you're going to see what Matthew is doing right now. So it's efficient in a lot of situations. Think when you have a level up mechanic, but your level up mechanic is not based on a formula. So your experience increase is not based on a formula. It's something static that you want to be very in control of. You want to, every single level, you want to have a close look at it. Then you can implement an array. You can see now that by pushing resources in there, we can look at the respective element in the array. So it comes as useful whenever you have a large number of different, let's say, requirements. I don't know, call it level, call it score, call it whatever, but you do not have a formula approach for it. So there's no way to determine it based on a formula. So then you just create an array. You saw like the Ethereum one that Matthew had. There was no way to predict that based on a formula. So he went like a mad lad and manually input all of those numbers. And yeah.
Did you just say I was like a mad lad?
I admit, I would have.
I've been called a mad lad. Thanks.
I admit I wouldn't have done what you had some mental fortitude in doing that. I admit.
I think someone just put their hand up for a moment, and then it disappeared before I looked.
They are misclicking, Matthew. They are misclicking.
Oh.
You have to be on the spot, like when you see it for a fraction of a second, just promote them instantly, like no going back.